Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome. We're going to have a leadership talk. You can already see on the screen who we're going to have as our esteemed guest. Words are less for what he's achieved, what his vision is, and what he keeps doing. And we're going to meet him shortly. You're going to listen to him. Please be very attentive. It's going to be very, very interesting to hear his perspective, to hear him talk about what he's done, and it's also going to inspire you for the journey that you have ahead in the 1 year, the 1.5 year, 2 year that you have here at Masters Union, and even ahead in life. It's not just about his achievements, it's also about how he's built them. We're just going to take 2 minutes. We're just waiting for him to come.
Yeah.
Guys, a round of applause when he enters. toothbrushes, televisions, movies, and now online education have in common? One man who saw possibilities where others saw none. From pioneering cable TV and building UTV to co-founding UpGrad and driving large-scale rural transformation through the Swades Foundation. He's failed, pivoted, but he's always built again. A relentless entrepreneur who's turned setbacks into stepping stones and ideas into industries. Named as one of the 100 most influential people in the world by Time and called the Jack Warner of India by Newsweek, he's not just a founder, he's a force. So please welcome a visionary, a builder, and a true game changer, Mr. Ronnie Screwvala.
When I did theatre in my earlier days, I never used to get boos and applause like that. So it's a good start.
All right. We don't actually have uniforms here. This is only for today.
Really?
Yeah.
You got to fool me.
Before you. No, but thank you so much for giving us time today.
No, on the contrary, I think, normally people ask, so what do you do for when you're got a break, or what do you do when you're down and out? And I want to tell you, this is my recharging when you're down and out. Actually, even at UpGrad, when I'm having a really bad day, I go back to the team at somewhere in alumni and say, can you organize a 50 people webinar? Really? And then you sit down and then you interact with 50 people and you're energized, and then you forget about all the other problems that you want to hit everyone on the head with, because that's the positive energy.
All right, hopefully we can do that again today.
I'm sure we will.
What's been the favorite movie or cinema that you've produced till now? Like one piece of art that you're truly proud of?
See, I think when one started, and firstly I just want to say, when we started a media company, movies was definitely not on the agenda. Like, we started being a content company, then we had 10 broadcast channels. The damn problem with movies is that they're larger than life, right? So everyone always remembers that, but actually at any given stage, that was one aspect of that. But because I was an outsider in the movies part, I think the one that kind of was my turning point, because the first 5 movies we made were absolute disasters. Absolute disasters. Why? Because we were having the herd mentality. We were following what everybody else was doing, which I think is an important management lesson also in many ways. Where you can't stand out, you don't have a moat, you don't have anything else. And everyone else had the star cast, everyone else had the right romantic connection, and here was an outsider trying to do that. So breaking out from that was very important. So I think Rang De Basanti for us.
Yeah, right.
I do want to tell you this just anecdotally, because when we came here and we had lots of censor problems at that, because obviously we were shooting the defense minister there, right, at that particular point in time. Though ironically, this is the spirit of, I think, the government, which always gets misunderstood from the other side, because actually when we finally got the censorship certificate, they wanted the armed forces, all the 3 armed forces, to come and watch the movie at that time. And the defense minister, who used to be Pranab Mukherjee, who then became the president of India and then passed away. So here was, on a seat there, Pranab Mukherjee came and sat down. By protocol, all the 3 army chiefs sit in the front, and they were wearing the caps. Now, Pranabji was a little bit short, so he kind of tapped their shoulder and said, "Topi nikal do." So they took out their hats. And then he got flanked by 2 lovely women, which was Sharmila Tagore on one side, and Wahida Rahman on the other side.
Right, yeah.
And Bengalis, for a Bengali, right? And then at the end of the movie, we thought, oh God, he's going to erupt, because he was the defense minister. And he just said, I don't understand, what's the problem? Yeah, but many mothers have come to me. So the army chief and the Air Force chief came up to us and said, look, you made a really good movie. Every 2 weeks, a mother calls me, very worried about their son or their daughter who's flying a MiG. Now they'll call me every day, but go ahead and make the movie. So I think that's the spirit which I think also exemplifies India. So I think those are the moments that you really treasure.
Was anything removed from that film at all? Are there any hidden scenes?
Only Maneka Gandhi got us to cut out the horse riding scene where Amir rides on a horse. We managed to get it on the trailer, but not in the movie.
No, but essentially you took that risk, right? You made the movie, you spent all the money. And at the end, maybe Pranab Mukherjee had a bad day, had a good day that day, but had he had a bad day, it could have all gone to...
No, our legal system in the country is not that bad. Not that I've ever gone to court on anything as far as that is concerned. Because I think if your spirit is, I think it comes through in the spirit of what you want to do. Sometimes it may be controversial, but if your intent is right and it's patriotic and it's in the right direction and you're saying the right message, you're not saying it to incite.
What would that script look like, right? We will not make the movie, I promise. But what would that script look like? I know you've written a book. It's, by the way, kept right over there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
What would that look like? And number two, how does somebody go about producing a movie, right? Something like Rang De Basanti, how does that project get conceptualized? What goes on behind the scenes? We only see the teaser, the trailer, the movie. But I really want to understand, I've always been curious, what happens in Bombay, right? What happens in Andheri or wherever all the studios are? But two questions.
Yeah, so two very different answers for two very, very different
questions.
connections because they're really not connected. But I think taking the first one on, see, I think the normal, when you sort of think you're going to make a biopic or write a book, everyone has a concept of legacy, right? That's the first word that comes to you when you think about that. Like, what's the legacy you want to leave? And I guess the reason why I'm saying it wouldn't end right and it wouldn't have a the end in the context, or not because it's a work in progress right now, is because I think legacy is an overrated word. Like most people ask you, so like, what do you want to be remembered for? And I'm saying, why would I want to be necessarily worried about how I'll be? I lived my life on my own terms most of the time. When I was blessed to do that, there were many moments in which I couldn't, and I wasn't fortunate enough. Now I think I'm a little bit more blessed, a little bit more in control of my own destiny. And doing it on your own terms and not reflecting on what other people think of you. That doesn't mean you're not sensitive to what other people think of you, but you don't make that as your goalpost and benchmark. Constantly either worrying or benchmarking how we'll be viewed by others. So I think for me, that would be my opening session with the scriptwriter and director, that how are we going to, because everything needs to have an emotional connect. Everything has, when you make a story, has to touch you and say, okay. And when you walk out of something, the beauty about storytelling outside of pure entertainment is that it touches you. It touches an emotion. Most people think when you're creating something out of you need drama, you need action, but at the core of it, which is why AI is not going to replace many of the things that we think it's going to replace, is because there's an emotional core. And I'm sure emotional will be taken to the next level by AI in some other form, misused or used in whichever way. So I think that's the core of it. So that kind of leads, go ahead, please. And that kind of leads me to the segue to your second question. It's like when you're a founder and you're an entrepreneur, you're looking at things and evaluating things on an opportunistic point of view. The beauty about a movie is also, it's a project, but it's a whole project. It's actually like a company, because it takes a year to seed sometimes, to write, then another year and a half to create. And then you have this most challenging task, which is not there normally, that how do you create a marketing campaign that in 14 days is going to get hopefully 1 million people into theaters worldwide to come and see a product that you had no concept of, but here's a marketing campaign in 14 days. We're going to be able to get you to come to a movie theater and connect with it enough for you to come there and enjoy it, but set the expectation right so that you don't come there expecting too much or too little. Okay. And then there's an entire one. So I look at it with an entrepreneur hat on, and I looked at it as a catalyst. And I think the reason we made the 84 movies, of which many of them were remembered, is because I behaved like a catalyst, where I definitely wanted to be strong and creative. But at the end of the day, after a certain level, you're backing the director's vision. And then you come in to surround that. And I think that again is something, I'm just putting examples here because I don't want to just talk about a story, I want to put it in context with what everyone here is thinking. That when you look at yourself and your backing and you build a team, how do you develop people? Is when you back people, you back their vision, you give them the encouragement. So you do a lot of homework before that. Then you back the vision. Then your role is to just back that person for a long period of time. Then by the end of it, you come back and start putting your commercial hat on, your marketing hat on, your distribution hat on, your merchandising hat on, your sequel hat on. How does this become more immortalized or whatever else? And that's how you do it.
Was Rang De Basanti also the most commercially successful venture?
It was commercially successful at that particular time. No, I think two most successful movies I would have made is the movie I made just when I sold UTV to Disney, and it was the last one when I was exiting, called Dangal.
Oh wow, of course, yes. Yeah, right.
So actually that one did about 400-500 crores of box office here, but it did 1,200 crores of box office in China. And I just want to tell you, I was by that time in my rare one year where I was employed as not an entrepreneur, but I was working for the Walt Disney Company as their managing director in India. And we were releasing the movie Dangal in China, and they were releasing Avengers, I think. Right? So it was my courtesy to inform everybody else that, look, we're doing this, but there are movies from Disney being released in China on the same day. They were some Hindi movie, whatever. And Avengers did 900 crores there. Dangal did 12 crores. And then everyone was on the phone saying, sorry, where was this memo or where was this mail where you said you were releasing kind of situation? So I think that would be one. And the other one that was very commercially successful because we made it a right cost was Puri, A Search for Stress. Swades was a movie well before its time. When any movie doesn't do well, what's the best vocabulary for that? It's before its time. Remember that when you have your failures. You can always start talking about saying something is before its time. And it was. Today, I think I'm getting more love and affection. Shah Rukh gets more love and affection. Ashutosh Gawariker gets more love and affection and respect for that movie. And we named our foundation, the Swades Foundation, after that. Yeah. Because actually, it was called Share before that. And my wife, Ronnie, and I were sitting on a terrace, and 4 students had come from our villages. So we called them for a cup of tea in the evening to explain to them, give them the background. And then just then sitting there when they left, both of us looked at each other and says, this is a very Swades moment, where Shah Rukh Khan goes to his NASA boss and says, I want to go back, and he says, go light your bulb, kind of situation. So that was the kind of moment. So we called both Ashutosh and Shah Rukh and said, we're calling our foundation this. Yeah,
that is awesome. No, it's my favorite movie. I mean, Rang De Basanti and Swades were two right at the top. But Swades always takes it on me. I watch it, I think, every year. Whenever I can. It's downloaded on the YouTube. Why is it available for free on YouTube? Why is it? Is it available? Yeah.
I think you must have done a hack.
No, it's right there. It's like Swades full movie, whatever.
Yeah?
It's on the official channel. Oh, well, okay. I thought it was on. That is fine.
Yeah.
That is okay.
No, but yeah, fair enough. But that I think it could be also because then there's advertising and whatever else.
All right. So coming back to now your initial story, how did you get into content and then entertainment? What was the trigger? What was the story? I tried to find online this older story about you. There's a lot about you post 2005, 10, 15, of course. What about Mr. Screwvala before that?
Yeah. Well, the Screwvala name actually works a lot, right? Because in the early days it broke a lot of ice. My best dates were when I could just say Screwvala. It broke a lot of ice.
I wanted to ask that question.
I thought you would have tried that. There. But no, I have to say, first 17 years, I would say I'm not categorizing that. I come from a lower middle class family at that particular point in time. So I think that family values that you build when you're in a very joint family, there's no attached bathroom in your house. In that first 10 years, I think were my strong memories there. But my memories were also going to school, which was very grounded, extremely grounded, very massy. Till date, I still do for students there today because I have a connection. And then I think my dad got a job in a multinational for the first time, so we moved into a slightly more respectable house.
This is all in Bombay, right?
Sorry?
This is all in
Mumbai. All in Mumbai, yeah. And then I moved to Cathedral. And I guess that was a different trajectory where suddenly from that very down to earth, you got a little bit of swagger in you. This thing, as much as I'm sure all of you all feel the swagger coming here to this university versus where you all are coming from before. So I think those were the sort of early days, but very strong family values at that particular point. Very rooted, very grounded, very... So
Today when also people ask me,
so
what's your risk appetite? And I said,
frankly, you start with risk appetite defined on what have you got to lose. Because if you look, what have I got to lose? Know what your base camp is, and it's acceptable to you.
It makes a big difference.
It makes a big difference. So I think that would be it. So at that stage in school, I tried sports, it didn't work out for me. I tried boxing and I got a nosebleed. So then I took elocution, dramatics and theatre as my kind of activity. And I think that was the changing path in serendipitously. Like a lot of us think we have a lot of back vision when we start things, but serendipity plays a big role, you know, where you're at some crossroad and then the idea is to be at many crossroads so that you get to one or two right crossroads in life. And I think theatre saw me through a lot. And at that stage when I finally decided that I wanted to start something of my own, two things. I mean, I think it was at a very young age because I had just finished my BCom. So here was the normal family discussion that would happen that, okay, if you want to do that, why don't you first do your CA and do your MBA or either of the two and then become an entrepreneur. And then I said, but that will mean I have a plan B, right? Because the minute I have a plan B, you can't be an entrepreneur. If you have a plan B, that's for management school. That's not for real life, right? It's good to have a plan B in your strategy thinking, but in real life, the chances are if you have a strong plan B or even a plan B, you kind of gravitate to that. That level of laser focus on your plan A goes away quite a lot. So I think I kind of turned down that thought process with a lot of, and I think that my parting statement from my dad was, you know, look, if you want to finally do this and go out on your own, go ahead. But if financially anything doesn't work out, we can't blame you. That's a good grounding level. That's a good starting point. Nothing to lose. As compared to today, I won't start a business unless I get funding. So, and I think that kind of, if you get that basis right, you get a lot right. So I think when I started off, the most worrisome factor for my parents is, so okay, they asked me, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm trying to figure it out, which is quite contrary today.
So this is BCom time.
Yes.
And now you're like, you did not do an MBA, is my...
No, I did not.
Yes.
Yeah. I think my whole life has been an MBA. Yeah.
No, so after BCom, you're like, all right, I have to figure my life out. And parents have said, you're on your own in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, but just one detour on that is because I was so supremely confident having gone to Cathedral School and that swagger in your face, that you go into college with this overconfidence. And in my second year into college, I failed. Right? Okay. So I completely plugged. You get that AT-KT kind of approach where you have to go out and do it again. So at that stage, there was a crossroad in my life also, where at that time it just feels like the most devastating thing that can happen to you, right? It's like absolute failure. You'll never recover from it. All your best friends have moved on. You're left here. Your parents feel I've worked hard and done all that. So it's like the most gutting feeling that you can have in your life in that context. But yeah, that's when I decided I wanted to start something on my own, which is quite the reverse and contrary to what you would want.
Let's go back to the first 100 days of your first venture, right? How did you validate the idea? Did you validate the idea? Was it just chance by chance things moved ahead?
Yeah, no, I think, again, as I said, because of theatre, I used to start doing for pocket money front of camera hosting on television at that particular point in time. And I think the first venture was cable TV that one started. Now here, that doesn't sound like a great idea to anyone, but at that stage when you had just one single channel called Doordarshan, and you had to get up from your chair to put on and put off the TV set versus a remote, then it's quite a challenging revolution at that particular point in time, which is right also. But forget the first 100 days, but for the first 365 days, we couldn't sell it to a single building in India, nor could we get a single consumer to take the idea that says, we're going to give you a second channel on your TV set.
How do you get the product in the first place?
How do we design the product?
How did you get the product? I mean, it was innovation at that time.
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, a little bit of media, a little bit of theatre, a little bit of traveling where you see the whole world is watching here, and why in India should we be subjected to one state broadcaster? I think was the core of the idea. And the idea was that we would set up a control room inside a building, which actually today you see most of the cable TVs are, and then you kind of string the cable along to people and different buildings. And I remember at that stage for the first, I would say 365 days, I was more the interior designer than the cable operator, because you would bang on people's doors and they would say, you know, it's the middle of the afternoon, why don't you come back at 9 p.m.? And then you come back again at 9 p.m. and they say, is there any time to come? You know, and then most of the time you felt, what was the problem? Till we realized that people were more worried about how the wire would get concealed than whether it was going to be that. So sometimes we look at a problem in a very different way. But the minute we started bringing designers in, we started selling. Because now we said, here's how the cable is going to go, here's how it will get concealed. And that seemed to be the idea-breaking point of that. Yeah, so I think the first 365 days was zero output. Almost all the 30 people kind of friendly that I hired told me, I think it's time to kind of wrap up.
And most of these were sales folks who were going building to building?
No, there was a lot of content folk also, there was a lot of creative folk, a lot of tech folk, because, you know, we had to...
You were building your own content as well?
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So you were building your channel?
Yeah, but we, yeah. And then we had one or two legal people, because at that stage, the copyright law was very, very different, and, you know...
And did other channels exist that you could air on your... So it was just your content? Wow, okay. And what year is this?
No, I can't remember. We can try. 1980.
1980. All right. So would that be equivalent of like what ChatGPT is today, like in terms of how new and how?
I hope not. I think it was tougher at that. Yeah.
No, fair. Okay, got it. So cable TV, 365 days, no sales, team is demotivated. What's next?
No, team is not demotivated. Okay. The team is skeptical, but it's not demotivated. Two big differences in life. And that's very important, because if you're skeptical, it's okay. If you're demotivated, it's the end. And I think that's a strong differentiation. So skepticism is always good. It keeps you on your toes. Then next day is another day, etc.
Next 365 days.
Yeah, that's when we finally convinced the place I was staying in to give us the whole thought process. And that was the kind of breakthrough.
And what was the first channel / programming that you launched on that?
No, so by that time we were recording some overseas programs also and being able to do that, because our copyright law was enough where you could record. I don't want to get into the nitty-gritties of it, not from any other reason, but like, so it was a good mix of everything that was going on at that time. Yeah.
So essentially, this cable TV business gave you that inlet into the entertainment industry. And what was the next one after that?
Yeah, I think next one was, then I think UTV happened slowly over a period of time, because then one started creating content for Doordarshan and so on and so forth. So yeah.
And what was the first movie then that you directed, the larger theme?
First movie that you created in the first 5 flops.
Okay.
It was called Dil Ke Jharoke Mein. Anyone heard about it? Absolutely no, obviously. It was a massive flop. It had Manisha Koirala in it. And the director came to me and said, "Sir, oh, cobra hai na, ek cobra ka scene hai. And he has to drink the milk. And they never drink the milk when we take the take. And he drank the milk." Super hit. The movie will be a super hit because of that. Because the cobra has drunk the milk. And, you know, like with up, Befikar. It was the biggest problem.
And but you know, this was your first film as a production.
Yeah, but by the time we were already into broadcasting, whatever else. So films, yeah, I think films was when I realized that if you want to build a B2C brand, we can create content, we can do X, Y, Z, but you need something larger than life. And I think when you're building a brand in media, a movie studio takes the brand. I think today Paramount is less known than a Disney for different reasons. So I think if you look at it in media, when you're building a brand, for me, it just sounded like we needed to be in movies. But I was the lone ranger there, because my CFO would every day come and say, "Ronnie, are you sure you want to be in this segment business, especially after 5 films?"
Yeah, and how the strength for the 6th one, how does that come after 5 flops?
Because you don't have a plan B. And because you don't have a choice, and because actually to give up on that would have meant that the whole vision would have gone to a very different space. And you need to have faith. I think the evolution from following the herd to I might as well behave like the outsider was the learning curve for
The
those
5th and 6th.
Yeah.
So what was the first one, the inflection point
That said, okay, no.
Well, we greenlit Swades, Lakshya, and Vasanthi at the same time.
The 6th, 7th, and 8th essentially in a way.
Yeah.
Wow, right.
So that time we greenlit them. We didn't know which ones would work, which ones would not work. So that was how it.
And so how do you, so what changed in your thinking, right? You mentioned that, okay, not following the herd and sort of, being yourself.
Yeah.
Sort of dig a little bit deep there, right? Like, what was the difference in the first 5 and the next 5? And what did you have to change in yourself to make that happen?
Actually, I didn't have to change. I had to change what I was trying to be versus what I always was going to be. Because I think when we started the media business and we started our channels and we started what we wanted to do, it was in that right spirit of exactly how we saw it. With the movies, I was out of my depth and therefore I wanted to follow the herd. So actually it was not, I needed to change. I needed to go back to my own conviction and my own self-belief of how one wanted to build the company, the business, the brand in the way in which you want.
And what was it that you wanted to do? That you weren't doing the first 5?
No, I think when you want to tell stories, either you can do it in a particular manner, and I think at the heart of it, we wanted to do something disruptive. We wanted to tell stories in a different manner. We wanted younger blood. We wanted to talk to newer directors. We didn't want anyone sitting in the room and saying, I know how to do this, or the only thing is how to cast a movie. We wanted to go for script first, not cast first. And I think those were the fundamentals. So I think if you're getting even a slight bit of acknowledgement with the kind of movies that we've done, and I can mention 20, which will be serious flops also, it needed that tenacity and that conviction. And if I can go back to that tenacity and conviction, it was my lower middle class upbringing, no plan B, and my dad saying, I won't be able to financially bail you out. When those things kind of ring around in your head, they take you through a lot of times in a lot of places where you feel differently.
Got it. And we always hear that this is a tough industry to work in, a lot of egos, a lot of actors having the thoughts, ideas.
Do you know an industry where there aren't any egos?
Right, much more inflated here, I'm guessing. Right?
No. The grass is not green on the other side ever in anything. And I would say, of course, it just looks like that because it's a...
more public, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because you're portraying bigger than yourself brands, right? So you need a high level of self-confidence in many things that you want to do. But in an operating sense, I don't think it's too much of egos. Nothing that I've seen differently in many other sectors where success happens, or with entrepreneurs. I've seen a lot more egos with entrepreneurs that have actually, in my opinion, tripped them in many directions than down.
And at the peak, when you have done all of these Dangal has just been done, you decide to switch careers. Most people at that stage of their lives would want to double down, right? Would want to go further deep. And you pivoted completely, right? And at that time, that was the first time I think I heard about you. And I was like, wait, this man has done so much, right, in this industry. And now he's getting into education. What is he thinking, right? Why? Like, you should just double down on what he knows.
Yeah, but see, as an entrepreneur, you can't think about your career. You have to think about the organization. You have to think about the company. You have to think about the people that are working with you. So I didn't think of it as a career move, number one. I think it was also a question that a lot in life is about the choices you make and the timing of what you do or what you want to do. And I think timing is important. So at that particular point in time, it was a listed company. I had a great partner in the Walt Disney Company. There are 3 members on our board. We needed more capital. If I diluted myself, I would be less than 25% of the shareholding at that time, which today doesn't make a difference because there are people running companies at 2% and 3% of their shareholding too. So at that stage, when they popped the question, it just sounded like the right thing to do. At that stage, you don't look at your career. You look at what the right thing is. You build a brand, and now you're selling it to a brand that's 100x of your own brand. You also feel that I just felt at that stage, I think we succeeded because we were always planning of how to be 2 steps ahead in the game. And sometimes we were, and most times we were, sometimes we were not. And I just felt that media was going to change as a sector very drastically, which I think it has. So if you ask me today, 10 years later, or 12 years later, do I have any regrets on that decision? None. Because I think asking yourself questions of in retrospect is actually a waste of time. It's really a waste of time because if you say, oh, if only, there is no if only, right? Because if only 3 years back this would have happened, but there are 19 other things that would happen during those 3 years that would have been very, very different. So you can't play back anything, right? Unfortunately.
actually fortunate. No, which is fair, but and why did you choose education?
Yeah, so I would say very distinct decisions. Timing of an exit was an exit. At that stage, I was not looking at what am I going to do next. And I knew at some stage I would either do something next or not. And I think to that extent, I spent the next 2 years being the managing director for about a year and a half and doing the transition. At that stage, I made a lot of private equity investments, including companies that have done well. Lenskart, I was the second investor there. And it's, worked with the founder for the last 10 years and built on something there. And then I realized, having made a lot of investments, that I'm a doer again. When I was leaving after a year at Disney, Bob Iger asked me, so, we've left you, you're almost like an entrepreneur in India, so what's the reason? And I said, 30 years back or 20 years back, I became an entrepreneur because I just felt I could not implement somebody else's vision. And I just feel today, I think it's a fantastic brand, which is the Walt Disney Company, Disney, but it's not mine. So I just don't feel I'm the guy who can work on somebody else's vision. And
create someone else's
thank you
legacy.
for the frankness and thank you for the candidacy. I don't think anyone would have told me that. I said only an entrepreneur would do that. And plenty of in that context. And I think that's very important for the conviction of what you do and what you want to do in life. Because it comes back to your self-conviction, right? Because at the end of the day, what is work-life balance that we all keep looking for? It's, if you're enjoying what you're doing, you can, and we've had enough controversies of how long a working day should be and how long everyone should work on.
Where are you on that spectrum?
No, I think it's how, I think the working part today for everyone here is how switched on you are, right? It's more about how switched on.
The timing doesn't matter.
So if you're switched on, you're switched on. It doesn't make a difference where and how you're working. Like, I don't have a conversation with my family saying, are you working today? Because they know if I'm toppling on or figuring something, you could be doing 5 other different things. Or you could be playing tennis and be highly switched on and working more than you were on a desk from that perspective. So I think
for me, it's when I'm in the shower.
That whole context of work hard in the sense of being switched on, I think it's just come to a very different level, and rightly so. Because I think the qualitativeness makes a big difference.
Good. And so education you chose. Did you do any market research before getting education? Or what was?
So I think at that stage, after I moved out, it was again 2 years of forever learning. And I think in my mind, literally, I was like reinventing myself at a very different stage in age. And for a lot of people, you might say this is the end of your education, but you're at different levels of that. And I think 10 years later, you have to. So I think at that stage, 2 things happened. We had a small not-for-profit, which actually we had started when we were 22, 23. And we had just started the company. So for a lot of people who think, you can only start giving back in life when you have a fat bank balance or gray hair, that's not actually true. So in those 2 years when I moved out, we met about 300, 400 NGOs across India and Bangladesh. We visited that just to understand what were people doing to give back and what was the context of philanthropy in the country, not in a fact of cutting a check. And at the same time, while we were doing that and we were adopting villages, and we then started working with schools in the rural villages, so the question of education kept singing around in my mind. And at that stage also I said, what do I want to build all over again? There were 1 or 2 sectors, but education kept popping up. So then I started meeting 200, 300, 400 people in that sector. So those 2 years were again just reinventing yourself completely and totally. And I think those were very memorable years.
Had it not been education, what would it have been?
I don't know.
No plan B.
No, I don't know. I just veered there, serendipitously comes back again, boom, and then you go for it. That's how it should work.
And what were the first 100 days of UpGrad like?
See, I have to say very different from that, because there I had got co-founders.
Yeah.
So this was not me trying to be the architect and telling people how to run a cable into a house. This was me being the catalyst. So I think at a different stage, when you're finding a company, you can have a different role. So there it was much more of getting a team together, putting a vision together, putting a strategy together, working with the co-founders, but more empowering and being a little bit more of a catalyst. Because by that time, I knew I want to spend 30% of my time on our not-for-profit, the Swades Foundation. And I did want to mess around and make a few movies here and there. Because that creative bug doesn't go away that easily.
So you were the catalyst in the early days, and I remember this one incident, and I don't know if you do. We had met, I think, in 2016 and 2017, and we had thought that we'll work together on a project. And it was mostly Mank that I was speaking to, but I realized that while we were discussing, you were very much sort of part of that email thread. And every now and then you would write an email. Let's say like I'm writing an email to him, which is let's say 10 paragraphs, right? Just throwing it up. He would come back with a 20 paragraph email, and I would always wonder how does he have the time? Like I literally watched a movie that he had produced yesterday, so he must have gone to the premiere there and all of that. And then today he's writing this email. So how, even at this stage of life, how are you so hands-on? Like even while being a catalyst, even while producing movies, even while doing everything else with Swades, how do you still get the time to be so hands-on?
So I'll answer that in two questions, two parts really, because I think it's important. Where I think in my early stages of my life, the number of people who didn't RSVP back to me or reply to my mails was humongous. And so today, in the last 10 to 15 years, I make it a point that any mail, not WhatsApp, but any mail, I reply to.
Now you know.
No, and because I think that's just ingrained in me. And the other part is it has to be replied the same day. Because I just don't understand the courtesy of somebody 4 days later doing that. And sometimes I have this little crisscross even with my wife, because when we were working on the Swades Foundation, and 3 days later suddenly she replies to 7 mails, and I'm saying this is irrelevant now. I mean, I replied this 3 days back. What am I going to do with this kind of mail? So I think that discipline there sets the standard for how you want to do your work culture with people, how you respect other people, how you respect other people's time, how do you come 5 minutes before a meeting instead of 5 minutes later than a meeting. It just shows respect. It just doesn't show you don't have anything to do and so you landed up 5 minutes early. It's just respect. So I think the context of reverting and replying is respect. And if you think brand building is anything but these kind of things, you can build a massive brand just on respect, rather than on a marketing campaign or on, a brand ambassador from that perspective. So I would say that, and I think that was one you said.
Just part of that, like how did you get that? I understand it's a priority for you, right? And you look at it all.
Yeah. No, I think from a time perspective and being hands-on, I think you said. See, I think when you build strong teams around you, that's one part. But I do believe today that you need to be more switched on than ever before, because just things change and move in a very different direction. So I think I'm more involved. I know we call it hands-on. Hands-on just sounds like an octopus with smaller tentacles coming down you, but it's actually, you need to be involved. Because you do need to be involved. Because frankly today, if you think you're in a job, you're going to look for work-life balance, and you're never going to find it. You're just never going to find it, because you're in a job. But I don't think today the world has got an opportunity for jobs, so to speak. Yes, if you're not working for yourself, you're working for somebody else. That's got a 20th century definition that you're in a job. But I don't think anyone today has the liberty or the right to think that it's just a job.
And then I can just sail through.
Yeah. Well, you're not going to sail through. Yeah. You're not going to sail through. So that's up to you. But if you don't care, then you may not care or not sailing through also. So that's also, it depends on each one's tolerance level to what you want to do. But I think today, if you're in a job, you're going to actually be more unhappy, more stressed than if you actually are into what you're doing, where you may feel, why am I giving it all, or why am I getting more involved, and why am I getting more stress? You're going to get actually less stress, because you're going to get more back out of it. You're not going to worry about your work-life balance. And then you're going to give it your all. And then you're going to learn faster. You're going to grow as an individual much better and much faster.
I have a couple more questions, but after those, I'm going to open it up to all of you guys. You can start thinking about what questions you have in mind that you want to ask him. But
outside of movies.
Outside of movies, I think we've covered that enough. But is UpGrad everything that you wanted to build from UpGrad perspective when you started off? Has it reached that stage? What is the vision now from here?
No. I think not at all. I think that would be very boring if that was the case in the first place, right? And it's not about. See, I think people look at today. You look at everyone, and the biggest word everyone keeps saying, and even when we have our town halls, is, "Oh, but things are changing so much in the organization." And I'm saying, listen, guys. Firstly, it's not change; it's dynamism, right? I mean, we're a dynamic company. Now you joined a company for the dynamism. You can't if you wanted to join, and actually there aren't even those MNCs where you're that corporate world. I think that is also changing because those people have to be, they're getting disrupted so fast. Whether it's a bank, whether it's a banking sector, which is regulated and therefore needs to be in a particular manner, but jobs are changing so rapidly in a different sense even there, that when you're sitting there and everyone says there's too much change and that's a very stressful environment, and I'm saying no, my job is to see to it that there's enough dynamism, because actually today I need people to question me that says, why haven't things changed as much as they should? Because my question to most people would be, if I didn't do, these things were not working, we have to bring about a change. But most people think that's a little bit too early. And I'm saying I would be more questioned for not bringing change than to bring change. And dynamism today is really where we are at. So if anyone is worried about change, I think you should forget about it because you're going to be in a dynamic environment. And the beauty about young companies or new economy companies, which you want to work in, is as soon as you reach a cup half full, is the job of the founder and the management team to actually empty that cup a little bit and start all over again. That's the dynamism. So if you don't like that environment, then go to a stale environment. But if you really have entered into a new economy and want to get into that, you're going to have to get used to dynamism.
Right? You know, they're all MBA students. They just started the day one essentially. Day
So
minus.
MBAs. Oh, you mean the MBA students start with, yeah.
They're day -2 actually, not even day 0. They start on Monday. You know, you wrote this book, Dream with Your Eyes Open. First of all, what does that mean for you? And for students who essentially came to a business school looking for a placement, some of them, of course, looking for an opportunity to build their companies, how should they think about the next 5 years? They're mostly 23, 24, 25 years old. How should they think about their life in context of this book?
Yeah, so firstly, I wrote this book because in that time when I moved out of media, I realized that most people, because I interacted with a lot of entrepreneurs, that most people didn't want to talk about failures. So I just wanted to talk about failures because I think failures comes on the asset side of your balance sheet, not the liability side of your balance sheet. And most people are embarrassed to that. And actually the reason why in a Western country, especially in the US, if you fail twice, there's a higher likelihood of you getting funded than if it's your first time. Because that's an asset side of your balance sheet. And here, every time everyone would, the fear of failure was first so big that even actually most people didn't even have a chance to fail. They were all talking about and rummaging around the element of sitting on the fence and talking about failure. I said, but you haven't even gotten off the fence and you're already starting to talk about failure. So this book was really a motivation to say, it's absolutely cool and kosher to fail. And I think that's the sort of motivation there.
What are some of the failures that you talk about in this book?
No, I think my ratio of failures to successes is 8 failures to 2 successes. And that is something, and I'm not talking about, again, with, just movies and hits, but just broad decisions in life. But I think they paid out for me because when you actually take a risk and then it goes wrong, it's a -1x, right? Because whatever it is didn't work out. You hired somebody wrong, you betted on a mutual fund, you got a company, you got an idea, you backed something, whatever it may be. I'm not talking about personal, it has to be in a professional. Personal can be very cathartic, can be very personal, so you can't bring that into context. But if you have that ability to be able to digest those 1x's off, the chances are you're playing at a different level and not overthinking and scrutinizing yourself. Otherwise you wouldn't be in too many minus. If you want to be safe, the chances are you get 5 right and 5 wrong. But when you're getting 8 wrong, the possibility or the distinct chance of the other 2 that come right being 20x and 30x is very high. And so if you do the maths, if 2 of them go to 20x, that's 40, and 8 of them are -8, it's a plus 32x.
Yeah.
So I know it doesn't work in that formula, but that is something that I think is important when you're looking at risks. And risk doesn't mean you just wake up in the morning, go with your gut feeling and take some flying risks. That's crazy, that's stupid, doesn't work that way. But to me, therefore, that's the multiple failures. I mean, I think the first 5 movies, most people when they went through that, the first 365 days when we didn't get a single customer, yet stayed with the idea. And on the flip side, when we started the first home shopping network in the country. And we bought time on Doordarshan from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. And our first product we made was the chapati maker. It was an instant hit. It was a massive instant hit. Everyone and everyone was flying off the shelves. We had 5 manufacturers. We had to make them 10 manufacturers. We were not running a home shopping network. We were running a small-scale industry of chapati makers. And the Doordarshan head changed. And he said, no commercials on Doordarshan. And he overnight scrapped that entire time slot.
Yeah.
So overnight, we were existentially zero. It took us about 3 months to get onto other satellite channels, but we never fully recovered in that context. Now, if I'd stuck along with that in retrospect, I think we would have been bigger than Flipkart, because we were at that stage where we would have morphed into e-commerce and very much there. But at that stage, there was no credit cards, there was no concept of many other deliveries. So, too early. It was definitely way early before its time. But finding out when it's early and not having the ego to stay with something because it was my idea, how can it not be right, is very important.
Are you in the process of producing your first AI short film?
Actually, to be honest, media is not on top of my mind right now.
But like about the industry in general, I think it's.
I think the industry is changing too rapidly, and all of you are here. The consumption of what you want to consume in content right now, you'll have a reflection of some of the movies you mentioned today. But if I ask how many of you all went to movies, how many times 3 years back to how many times you go now, it'll be 1/3. Right? And storytelling has changed not just because OTT platforms have come in, but actually they have, because if you see today, the storytelling on OTT platforms is much better. It's got a sense of realism. And the third part, which I think most people are missing, because there are 2 things in storytelling, which I think AI doesn't. One is emotion, as I mentioned earlier, and the second is characters. Because today, if you're watching anything on OTT, you're actually watching it because you fall in love with some of the characters. The story is balanced with that. You love the characters in succession if you're involved with it, and the sort of very different opposing elements of that, and that's why you can binge. So you think you're binge watching, but actually you're falling in love with people. You're falling in love with characters, which you can't do if you're watching an episode a week. You can't fall in love with somebody every Sunday, but you can fall in love with them if you're watching them for 11 hours, 12 hours, 13 hours. Fair.
But from a technology standpoint, with Google VO3 and we're seeing all the video production that's happening through AI now, do you think there's a future where, and this is my personal curiosity, where we may not have actors and we may not have cameras, we may not have sets, and entire storytelling with emotion can have
sets or sex?
Sets.
Oh.
All that.
I thought that.
That's a fair point, actually. That too. Sets and sets. No, but I think with AI, I mean, with the production and everything that's happening, with the video quality that we're able to achieve now, do you think like that's going to happen where we'll have a 4-hour film where I can just go to Netflix and say, today I want to watch something like this, and then sort of it conjures it up in real time and gives you a movie with the actors that you already love and with the characters that you're already invested in?
So there's a legal series that I watched recently, and in one of them there's a lawsuit in a case where this one woman goes to court and says, I was mauled. And they said, how? And she said, well, look, they sold me this entire VR element, and in the VR element, the game is, this girl is getting mauled out there. And because I was in this VR, I could feel myself that way, so I'm suing the VR company for rape. Let that get digested here. For
Impact, not intent.
Okay, so that's what technology is doing, where it's putting you into that real world. So I give you that as the best classic example here, that's the downside and upside, right? I mean, there's going to be a lot of good things about AI, and there's going to be a lot of rough things about AI. But the very principle that somebody felt, no, but you gave me this, and you made this content, I picked it, it was your choice, I exercised the choice, and I just feel, I feel completely sort of opened up. And I think just the concept of that, and actually it was done 3 years back, so it wasn't,
it's not new,
it's not very recent. So I think, I'm answering your question in a little bit of a roundabout manner, but I'm just trying to give you the context today that when you start looking at the positive and negativity of everything else, the scope of how people interpret it and your ability today to see things with such different lenses is going to open up an incredible amount of opportunities for you all. So to answer the second question, I'm saying here I say broadly, you're entering to look at, not just being a management student, but looking at the world in a very different manner today. And that's not because we have 3 geopolitical wars going on, because I think 200 years back everyone was at war, and just 75 years back the whole world was at war. So that's not going to change the environment. So that shouldn't be a shock and awe situation that this is a special circumstance. But I think the opportunities today for the next 5 to 10 years as you think about things is going to be a lot, but it's also going to be very fragile. So how are you going to build your inner strengths to look at exactly what I mentioned, the sort of ever-changing, dynamic world? And I'm using the word dynamic versus change because change can just sound like a very negative word, but dynamism just sounds a positive word. So I'm putting a positive twist to the fact that you need to figure out how you're going to be dynamic and what are you going to glean out of it. And I think today what I've learned in UpGrad for some of the things we're proud of is the element of the peer-to-peer learning, because I think today more important than anything else. And I think this Masters Union exemplifies the fact that we don't need to get into a structure. You don't need to have this 1-on-25 situation. That you can sit down in a conference room with 5 people and still learn. So that sort of dynamic environment and the peer-to-peer learning, I think, is the future. So how are you going to be able to today use the next 1 year, 2 years in that context of being strong with your peer-to-peer learning? Enter into a dynamic world, massive, massive opportunities, but you need to be resilient in a very different manner. And maybe the last thing I would say, starting at the very beginning of what we talked about, is I think outside of the fact that my lower middle class kind of shaped me, and then theater shaped me to creativity, and then serendipity shaped me in the ways it dragged me in that. But I think my earlier days taught me one thing which I think is very important today, is this sense of entitlement. And I say that to all of us here to reflect, because we all start with a lot of sense of entitlement. And that actually is a huge challenge, because the more you feel entitled, the more disappointments you're going to have in life in any case, right? But if you don't feel entitled, forget about humility, forget about all the other stuff. It'll all happen if you just have a lower sense of entitlement. Because then disappointments won't come your way, but you'll always have your eyes wide open even if you're dreaming, and your feet on the ground.
What does entitlement mean to you? Or how do you see it in people?
Yeah, so I'm saying, and that's important to sort of explain, because I'm saying entitlement in a sense that most of us feel, why is this happening to me? Like, why am I missing out on something? Why is this not happening to me, or why is this happening to me? And I think we spend a fair bit of time to what we want to do. But if your sense of entitlement is a little low, your expectation, and I'm not saying your ambition, you just have a very different grounded way in which you look at things. You will, I guarantee you, the opportunities will look bigger, the solutions will come faster. You won't mess around with the mundane things that waste a lot of our time. Again, how do people think of me? How will I be viewed? What is the situation here? You should just have a very realistic sense of entitlement.
Ramdev Vasanti was about entitlement, if you think about it.
Was the what?
Was it about entitlement, where, before the transformation and before the inflection, the characters of Ramdev Vasanti, on somewhat entitled?
Well, look, I mean, even after the movie was, let's look at the recipe. This was one of the first movies where you had only male people. You had Soham, but she was not really in there. So you had all male stars. No lip sync songs at that time. No song and dance around the tree. And all the hits at the end. Now, if anyone at that time said, would you greenlight a film like that or a story, I'm not going to watch this shit. So I think that's...
No, I mean the characters themselves.
The characters?
Right, so I'm trying to unpack entitlement.
Yeah.
And at the beginning of the movie, they're sort of complaining about what's happening.
Yes, you're right.
So they're like fully grounded.
Yeah, and then you just realize life is very different. And like, what are we all talking about here? I mean, what are we thinking when we think, the whole world owes us a living?
Or even like Lakshya for that matter. Like, I think in the beginning, and then he goes through that transformation. Alright, awesome. I wanted to bring it back to Sinman before we go to session. Alright, oh wow, that's way too many. Okay, how do we do this in a structured way? Alright, we'll start in the middle. Yeah. Happy to hear you. Just take the mic. Tell us your name, where you're from.
I'm Om Deshmukh, sir. I'm from Pune. And first of all, very big fan of yours and your movies. So basically, when I think that I want to start something of my own, what I think is, what if it fails? And in your journey, we have seen that you have got 5 movies that failed one after another. After that, you got that cable business, then Roti Maker. So how does one person overcome this fear of what if it fails?
How do you overcome it? You have to experience it to overcome it. If you don't experience it, how are you going to overcome it? So I think you're still waiting from the outside and want a running commentary of how to overcome it. And I would say the best medicine of overcoming it is to experience it. Because you think you're going to experience it only once, forget about it. 200 times after that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
That doesn't mean leap. That doesn't mean jump off the cliff without a parachute. But it definitely means go out and experience it. Because I think we overthink too much of what is. And if you're too much of that thinker, then don't think of starting something on your own, because chances are you'll be constantly self-questioning yourself. And then it won't be a very successful one.
You've taken the 1 crore target, and dropshipping.
Yeah.
All right. Above you, right? That's it. Yeah. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. I'm Namita and I'm from Mumbai. My question to you is, actually, if one decides to start something of their own now and you're really passionate about it, and there are 2 things that people often mention. One is, if you're really passionate about it, be consistent, keep going. 3 years, it might not do as well as you thought, but the 4th year, you might get what you wanted. And on the other hand, some people say you need to know when to exit and move on. Right? You're really passionate about it, but you need to figure out that this won't work out for me, and you need to exit that and go to something else. So how does one decide that, okay, at this stage, I should move on, or I should continue working hard?
Yeah. No, thanks, and that's a good question. Firstly, I'm not a big fan of playbooks. So everyone has to have their own playbook. Everyone is looking for playbooks. I'm saying, sorry, this is my playbook. How is it relevant to you? What is it for your playbook? You can read it, but if you're going to start following it, you're in big trouble. You have to experience it, understand it, and move on, and then put it into context. So whatever I'm going to say, you have to put it into the context of what you're saying. Second, I would say is being passionate is overrated, because it can actually lead you down a garden path. It's important that you're passionate. And I guess to answer the question earlier that, where was I and what we were doing, and then one fine day decided to exit. A year later, when I had to define that moment to people, I said, look, I think I was passionate about something, but I was not emotional about it. Because that passionate and getting emotional is a very conjunctive word. And if I was emotional about what I want to do, I would have never sold the company, because I would have thought exactly that. It's mine. I built it. How can I let it go? And a lot of people, at that time, Flipkart hadn't exited at $1 billion and whatever else. So at that stage, exit was a bad word in 2012. In 2016, it became a good word. So all I would say is passion is it can get you down the path. That's not good enough, and you need validation. And then the third part is, you're right. There is a small sliver between being a pioneer and being before your time. And I think at that stage, if you don't have that confidence of where you can determine between the two, chances are don't do something so out of the ordinary in the beginning that is so first mover that there isn't a precedent, and try and follow that. And I'm just giving that as a guideline, because if you still wish to do that, yes, you'll have to be clear. For me, home shopping was before its time. But in 3 years, I didn't have the ego to just say this is not going to work for me, regardless of that thought process. But when it came to some of the other things, I felt I didn't have a plan B. I was going to build a B2C brand, and I want to stay with that. And today, I think we've had enough knocks when we're doing things in forever learning and in education, and especially in our rural villages, where if you want to make change in education in rural India, it takes 10 years. And at the 5th year, when we started seeing our impact reports, and we're still seeing the impact having been made, but in the 6th year, it was magic. So yes, a lot of it has to do with timing, is what I would say. If you want to take that chance, try to do something which could be a little bit more where it has a precedent, gain some confidence, and then do something more disruptive.
Otherwise, you'll have to be a little sharp. But only you can answer that question. Not even your parents, not even your spouse of the future, no way.
So it's a mix of your gut feeling and practicality?
See, because gut feel is actually an open thing till your gut feel only gets filled with failure. A gut feel of getting up in the morning and trying to be bindas about something is not a gut feel. That's just rashness. But a gut is actually means you had a fair bit of cathartic moments and a fair bit of failures, so that now your gut is telling you whether to turn left or to turn right.
Right, I'm going to this side. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Nanzi. I'm from Delhi. Firstly, it's truly inspiring to have you on board. You're only a first billionaire in the Bollywood industry that comes across from the Forbes billionaire list which currently released. So it's truly inspiring to have you on board. And my question to you is, recently in an article from your story, I read, as you said, and I quote, that you should have a list while you're starting an entrepreneurial journey and a business. You should have a list which should be personal and subjective, but fundraising should not be on your list.
What should not be?
Fundraising should not be on your list. So, as someone who's a student, so two parts of it. Once you're raised, like you're funded, suddenly you become credible. And as a student who's not backed by a lot of capital, why would you say that, and what exactly do you mean by that statement?
Yeah, I mean, I'm saying it from personal experience, because two things I'm seeing today. The biggest problem for an entrepreneur as a recipe for success or failure is excess capital. And I'm going to repeat that. And let them weigh it out. But for me, this benefit of success was frugality. And the question I will ask each of you all is, when do you think the best ideas and solutions will come to you? When you have more money or less money? When you have more money or when you have less money?
Some money.
So that's the in-between. So I think that's what I was saying, and that links into entitlement. Because as an entrepreneur, you feel, if I've not got funding, how can I start? And I'm saying, forget it, man. Then you're not, because if you think you were blessed enough the first time to get funding, and if that was your entitlement complex and you think good, there are going to be 10 other times. Those times will be 10 times more difficult. At least here you can quietly back off. The next time you have 30 people, 50 people, 100 people working for you. And again you feel the sense of entitlement, you can't raise funds. What are you going to do? Because if you believe that that's a cycle, but I keep reading in the economic times how everyone's getting it, how come I'm not getting it? Right? Don't read the economic times. So I think it's practical and important that you start in a frugal manner, in whichever way you can. That doesn't mean it's a bad word. It can't be the first word, is what I was trying to say. Does that help?
Yeah.
So are you going to raise capital?
That was the aim to be here. As Fatima, everybody here is here. I feel if you want to build something, once you're funded as a student, I feel that credibility goes really high. You're in the limelight, and that also becomes your Adam story. So that was the aim, but again, I get the point.
But raising funds is not a fun, it's not a chest thumping moment.
Correct.
You soon realize that.
Correct. I've not been there, so trying to learn
Yes,
that.
you're right. You haven't first thumped
Yes.
your chest once at least to know that.
All the
And
ones
chest
that
thumping.
you're speaking about, I think the fundraise moment was like that 10th moment, right? The first 9 moments was the first client, second client, third client, fourth client, the fifth client leaving and then coming back, the sixth client not paying on time.
Yeah.
And so they've been through that journey, which often we don't see.
Yeah, we
And the
need the
10th
success
step,
stories.
Yeah, we only see that fundraise moment,
Yeah,
but
correct.
what goes
You
behind
build
it?
an incredible culture of people when there's less and more.
Thank you.
You go up top. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, man. Are you surprised?
So for a 24-year-old with no roadmap, what is the smartest way to fail in the next 2 years?
To continue to have, what is the smartest way to fail?
In
Is
the
to
next
have a
2
roadmap.
years. Yeah. Since from movies.
No, but cruise a little bit, it's okay.
So
You don't need to have all the answers in front of you always.
Yeah.
It's perfectly okay to not have all the answers. You need to be aware, but you don't need to always have the answers. Sorry, but you were asking.
Yeah, I was saying that since you've shifted so many fields from movies to then
media, yeah.
education and media to education and then rural development, which of these has given you the most resistance and what keeps you going?
Different things at different times. Giving back is a very strong and powerful one, right? And the point is, we're not cutting a check. We're involved. We're in the rural part of it. We work at a very large geography. I've been obsessed with scale for a long period of time. That's my good part, but it's also my bad part in that sense, because I'm obsessed with always scaling. Sometimes it's not always the best thing to do. So I think the giving back has always been strong. When we started off, and in my early 20s, and we started the company after cable TV, and we had a 10,000 square foot office, and the first 1,000 square foot, we opened a creche and an old age home. And I don't know why. I mean, if people ask me, how did that happen? It was a rented place, and we just gave 1,000 there. It didn't make any sense. But the culture of the first 30 people that joined us, 40 people who joined us, there was no work-life balance concept. It was 6:30, 7, 8, then everyone hang there till 10 o'clock, play with some of the open kids, play with some of the elderly people, form a relationship. So I think from that very moment and there onwards, it's just been in the DNA. So I think that's been very. But to sit at Delhi University with 10,000 people and explain, and just when we were releasing Rang De Basanti again, and again, students raising their hands. At that time, everyone was skeptical. Sir, you're making this movie, but my voice doesn't count. And we started the conversation. It was supposed to be a half an hour one. It went on for 2 hours, that discussion. And at the end of it, everyone said, my voice will count. So it was that entire context of us being able to say that each of your individual words. So the reason I was saying is, storytelling is also very impactful. So that's something that also gives me a big high. And I think we're all here. I mean, Pratham is high and he's always got this fit look and he's because of the impact he's doing in education, right? So you look at all of that. Yeah, I think I'm very, very blessed. Thankfully not entitled, but blessed.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Second row. Yeah.
Hi sir, I'm Akshaya, I'm from Delhi. A few of us were having a very interesting conversation with one of our visiting professors yesterday, and we were talking about the importance of principles and all in life. I would love to know what are some principles you really abide by in life.
Yeah. Well, I think I would say the first one being one where not feeling entitled, I think has been a very strong principle for me. I think second is you are defined by the choices you make. Because the decisions you make and the choices you make are some of the most important things in life. And I think we should pay a lot more attention to the choices that we make in our personal life, in our work life, and whatever else. I think the third principle for me is say it as it is. And it's not something that I feel now, I felt even then. I think the first time when I had the cathartic moment to tell the core team members in our company that we were not going to meet salary that month or for the next 3 months. I had this context of trying to window dress it and saying it's a tough time, but maybe give me 2 more weeks and I'll try and find a solution. But I just melted out and I said exactly what I wanted to say right there and then. And I realized that most people, when you're earnest about something, will take you at face value forever. And I think that's very important. So today's generation is just very important to say it as it is, because there's so much of fake news, there's so much of perception, there's so much again of social media pressure around things, that just being yourself is very, very important. And people will respect you for that. And yeah, and the last one I would say is just respect. I think it's quite surprising how much this concept of respect is taken for granted, but it's actually quite artificial today. And it really defines you in so many ways, because it's not about you being, humble, and you just saying yes sir, no sir doesn't mean a damn thing. That doesn't mean you're humble. But I think if you have respect for people, you bring humility to yourself. Yeah?
Thank you so much.
Yeah, go for it. The acoustics are actually pretty good here.
Hi sir, I'm getting live streamed, so that's
Yeah.
Hi sir, my name is Ayush and I'm from Surat. I actually had a business situation for you to answer to. So basically, when you entered the movie business, or not per se the media business, at that time the distribution was very, streamlined. Rather today, when the movie business or the media business, where the distribution is scattered, and overall the movie business is going through a bit of a turmoil also. If you wanted to start today, how would you start?
Yeah, okay. You want to be in the diamond business or in the movie business?
Sir, I want to be in the business.
Which business do you want to be in? Because then I can give some context to it.
I want to be in EdTech.
You want to be in EdTech? Yeah. Sure, okay. Okay, but let me answer your first question as to how. So please, I think the question is, these are all operational situations here. What was then, today is now, whatever it is. The question is, what do I want to build? What is the need that I want to do? Where do I feel is a massive gap? And how do I want to build it? Do I want to build it disruptively? Do I want to build it in a particular manner? Do I want to be a service? So I think the environment will constantly be either at loggerheads with you or will be changing. That's a given. There's never a good time to do anything in that context. So that would be my basic principle that says, okay, what my challenge is there, if they're different today, if I feel I need to spend a year to do research to figure out what exactly consumers are feeling today before I launch something, because I want to see content patterns, I'll spend that time. And I'll get the answers. I will go the answers. If I don't have the tools, I'll take the last 30 years of cinema and research and do focus groups of people at different storytellings, including what's going on today, and I will come up with my own thought process. So all I would say to you in general, for whatever sector and business you want to do, dynamic external environments are not in your control and will never be. Now the question is, how are you going to stand out and be a solution provider for being able to do that? So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that gives me pretty much clarity.
It does? Yeah. The clarity to do what? You're going to do it or not?
So one thing, that if I would have started at the level when you started, so I might have gone into the movie business, but today if I wanted to do it, then I might take a more amount of research and I would find out the gap exactly where I want to build, or else I would not build. Rather, I would find an industry where there is an actual gap and then I would get into it.
And there's no gap in this sector, and I would advise you that you're on the right line if you think you want to do something in education.
Right.
Yeah. There's no ed-tech concept. This tech and ed is a nice word.
Education.
It was for a lot of funding. Now it's called ed AI. It's not called ed. Because you can get more funding because you can call it ed AI.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, sir. It's an incredible honor to talk to you. So my question is about your interest into sports and how UpGrad has a team in the chess league. So how are you looking at it from because it's a niche sport which is on the rise now. So from a pure investment point of view, how are you looking at it, and what's the roadmap that UpGrad is?
Sports was a little bit like media was, like an underdog situation, right? Because cricket is, now the whole world has moved away from cricket. We're the only cricket country in the world right now. 90% of all revenues of cricket in the world come from India. Test matches only we sit down watching. Even in England, when they're saying that, nobody actually watching that. So when you look at that sport, we need a second and a third sport in India, number one. Two, sport is an important DNA. We look at it as an extracurricular activity. Today, about 7-8 years back, we wanted to take about 100 kids, and we did 100 kids in football and took them to Germany for 3 years of training. And my model there was that at the end of 3 years they'll train, and then we will place them in various La Liga and other teams across the world. But my biggest challenge was the parents. Because the conversation with the parents was, no, wait a minute, you're going to take the kid away, you're going to take my son away or my daughter away in that context. So they won't do the MBA. No, I said they're going to be a sports person now. They're going to do the MBA. I mean, but nobody has a respect today for building a career in sports in that context, because you just feel it's not going to be. So I think my origin of this was to look at the underdog, and our first thing we did was kabaddi. right? So I think in the Kabaddi, if you look at today, that ecosystem of what we've got there and what happens, it's a strong sport. But now you've got people that earn 2 crores, 3 crores. And Anup Kumar here in Gurugram, who was our captain in our first team, is a deputy police commissioner. And he's still there, so he still earns his little salary, and then he comes and gets 2 crores rupees. Then he goes back to his 14,000 rupees or 18,000 rupees a month context. So, to me that was the excitement of that. Chess is, by the way, this is all I've done on my own. So when I don't get a sponsor, I put an UpGrad logo. Definitely the UpGrad. So, but it is because I don't think UpGrad should be in sports. Just to sort of yeah.
Thank you so much.
But chess, I think, is becoming it's a very young sport, and it's a very intellectual, it's a very active sport that people should do. I don't know whether it's called a sport because it's not a sport in that true sense, but yeah.
So I would just like to take this opportunity to thank you for making Rang De Basanti. The Luka Chupi song is such an emotional song for me, and it's the only song that I cry to every single time I watch it. So just from this moment, thank you so much.
Thank you. Lovely. I went into outer space yesterday. I don't know how many of you were there. Because when you're running a long marathon, or when you're doing something really tough that you want to do, including going to space in that first 2-3 hours, you've got to talk to yourself. You don't run a 30-kilometer marathon by just saying tenacity. You've got to talk to yourself at that time. That's when you sort of break down in that context. When he was listening to You Hi Chala is where the song is.
Okay.
The band
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Again, I think we're all super grateful. I think you've shaped the movies that you've later produced, have shaped all of our childhoods, right? And I come from an army background. My name is Aribal. And the patriotic element of the movies as well, I think you briefly touched upon it as well. I think that has brought in so many people into the armed forces as well.
Yes.
So, and because we are in that community, so we're super, super grateful. We just, again, like to continue that attitude as well.
We don't use ourselves as a soft power today, right? I mean, I hate to say it, but the Americans haven't won a war since World War II. But the bloody Hollywood there projects it like they're the biggest superpower in many ways, and they're going to be a bully because of that context. But they haven't won a war. They've only walked into countries and been kicked out of them, or withdrawn from them, and never won a war. But if they want to shoot 200 people in a country that they actually go out there and infiltrate wrongly and do that, the movie wins an Oscar. That's the irony of that thought process. So I think recently, Uri the Surgical Strike and a biopic we made on my wife's grand uncle Sam Manik show. Again, I think we don't have enough role models in this country. So I think storytelling to bring about role models here, and that's the soft power. That to me is also the impact, because what movies in the US have done is also shaped many industries, many businesses, many mindsets of people in many ways.
My grandmother had the privilege of serving with General Sam during the Bangladesh conflict.
Right.
And the stories that we heard in childhood were portrayed on screen, and that continues to inspire us 3 generations later. So we're super grateful. So I just had a small question, right? Obviously, you've donned many hats during the course of your professional career, and from an investor, from an entrepreneur, being in the media business. I just want to know, I was super curious, right? In this very fast-moving, dynamic, day and age of disruption, how do you consume, knowledge? How do you keep on track? What systems do you have in place? I'm just curious on what your take on.
What I'm doing here right now. What I'm doing here right now. That's my ROI, I would say. The questions you're asking is going into the left brain that just says, what is people thinking? What are we all asking? What's topmost in our mind? What we want to do? When I think the 2 years when we started and wanted to scale up our NGO, and our best model came from Bangladesh, from a gentleman called Professor Faisal, who was pretty much the same level as Professor Yunus, who at that time ran the private bank, and he's the caretaker prime minister of Bangladesh. And when we all kind of met them, and they're literally those are very needy countries that really needed those kind of philanthropists, and we're inspired by those models. So there is no better time than to constantly keep doing that.
Thank you so much.
And I'll tell you one thing about him. So when I think early days of UpGrad, he had visited us in Jalandhar. Right? Flew all the way to a random city. I think he spent the entire day learning about how LPU functions, and he spent time with my dad, etc. And I realized the curiosity at that time that he had to do the research on the ground. I think that's another way.
Yeah, I think, but it should be with all of us, frankly. That's why I'm saying you need to be switched on, and you can't. Today's generation, you cannot treat a job like a job. I can't tell it to you any other different way. And if you need to, you need to. But I would advise not so.
Can I just double click on that? Don't treat job like a job. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean that it has to mean something to you. Even if you're in a company, you don't need to be in a company for your whole life. You don't need to be in a company for more than 2 years, 3 years if you want to do that. But every 2 years if you're going to move, because you've got a slight bit of a different designation and a slight bit of an increment, at the end of 6 years after 3-star jobs, you'll have less to show for yourself than maybe if you move for either the right reason or you grew in an individual company. That's one way. The second way is, I think, when you're looking at a job, you have to give it your best versus saying, what are you going to do for me and what are my entitlements? Of course, you'll have your commercial transactions to what you want to do. But then, immerse yourself in it. Because actually the ROI on yourself will be very high, as much as what you're giving back. And the more you do that, the faster you're going to grow. The faster you're going to grow individually, the better you're going to move in your career in any case. So your ROI for not looking at a job will be 3x, 5x, 10x. Then if you look at things from a transactional point of view. Transactional point of view.
Just behind you. And then I'll come in, sir. Promise, sorry.
Thank you so much for being here, sir, today. And I believe I can say for everyone, it's been quite insightful. Now, my question is that you've had a highly decorated career in 2 different industries. And essentially what I can say is you always have a team to do so, right? But what are the characteristics that you look for in your team to help your vision materialize into reality? And how do you find those people? Like, what do you look for primarily? That's my question.
Look, there isn't a formula, right? But I think attitude plays a big part of what one would like to look at too. And I think that whole element of attitude of how you want to approach it, people that are not looking for a job, that's very important in one aspect. Today, I think one has to look for problem spotters, not problem solvers. 5 years back, if somebody would ask me, I would say I'm looking for problem solvers. I don't think we have time for problem solving. We are only going to be successful if you can spot the problems. Because this takes too much time now to even actually solve a problem. You've got to be a problem spotter. So are you the problem spotter of tomorrow? I think the next 1 year, just figure out how you're going to really sharpen your wits, because that's what the world needs. And I mean that again to double click, as Pratham put it. The fact of the matter is, yes, normally, you're out there and you can solve problems, but looking around the bend for opportunities or a truck to come and slam you away, the bad or the good part of it, is 10 times more valuable today than it was before. And if you're moving in a dynamic environment, actually being a lot more alert and aware is almost mandatory for whatever you want to do. Either if you're self-employed, whether you're a lawyer or a doctor or whatever else you want to do, or you're in your own business or you're in a job. So I think that characteristic is something that will actually pay rich dividends for what one wants to do.
By the way, has anyone worked in UpGrad before? Do we have any one? Okay. This is my team actually.
I've taken a session via UpGrad.
Oh, you've taught
I've taught someone as part of the marketing.
Yeah. Samantha, again, go ahead.
My question will be, should there be a sense of patriotism while doing business? Like your own company, like your movies are self-explanatory, but your UpGrad is an Indian answer to Udemy or Coursera. The person sitting next to you, his vision is to put Master Union next to Harvard, Stanford, and himself being a graduate of Wharton. So And nowadays, it's generally a pattern that people want to just raise valuation, go to Cayman Islands, and just should there be a sense of patriotism in?
I think you are reading too much of Economic Times. Stop reading the newspaper. It's fantastic if you could. There's no question about it. I don't think it's a mandatory situation. I don't think you can put that in your articles of association, so to speak, that it needs to be. And patriotism is a little bit more of an evolved word, but I think the fact, I would put it slightly differently. This obsession that a lot of people want to build global companies, I would say just, focus makes a big importance. India is a tough market to do business, right? And a lot of people ask you, it's, our ease of doing business here. And to a lot of entrepreneurs who, again, with a lot of sense of entitlement, ask you that, but it's very difficult to do business here. And I'm saying, guys, just be thankful, because that's your competitive edge. Because if you work in a place where it's not that complicated, it's going to be such a competitive environment. At least here, it's part of your moat. Some of your global companies can't come in here because sometimes it's a little complicated. So you should look at opportunities in a different sense as a moat. But to answer your question here, I think it would be great. Today, sense of national pride is very important, rather than patriotism is our. And yes, you should. I mean, in rural India, one of my biggest tasks and challenges, and I know we haven't talked about that because we've talked more about the movies, is to how to make agriculture cool. Because only can you, if I do that, can I get the youth to stay in the villages. And we're not going to be a China, where they suddenly organize 200 million people and move cities and expand that. And we're not going to. You've seen that. And it's a great tunnel that I came through from the airport here, and it took me 15 minutes less than that whole process, and we are increasing our infrastructure. But our cities are not here to get 600 million people to move and urbanize this country. We're going to have to, for our Viksit Bharat, we're going to have to find different solutions. We can't pick up from Netherlands and China and do that. We'll have to do it very differently.
Like, we can't do the next great leap forward.
And therefore, the national pride of what you want to do and how you want to build, it's a huge opportunity that create the impact of what you want to do, because there's so much to be solved here in many ways. It will be tough. It may not be always gratifying because the ARPUs or the level at which people want to pay for brands is lower. And you might have the enticement that my ARPU will be better in the US. Yes, but you will be knocked off with competition, and you need much more resilience in what you want to do there. But I would say building something with national pride is good versus patriotism.
Hi, so grateful that I'm being able to ask a question to you. I want to really know if you ever made a decision that everyone around you doubted initially, and it turned out to be a pivotal part of your journey. Since you've already worked in multiple industries, I'm sure there has been at least one instance where you've actually made a decision and everyone was not on board with it.
Yeah, no, I would say many times, not just once in that context. It's sometimes very difficult to just come up with 2-3 kind of examples, but from that very early stage, including when one started off, I think the context at that time to be an entrepreneur was a very uphill, was an uphill task. Today, I think, not just because of Shark Tank, and not just because of Economic Times, and not just because of unicorn status, and not just because the Prime Minister said, Startup India, but long before that, it was very challenging and different. So yeah, I would say a lot of the times, you have to build on your own self-conviction. And I think that is part of the value system that will make you slightly successful and increase your chance of success. Because at the end of the day, when you get the knocks, the only reservoir you have is your self-conviction and the empathy of your family, but not the strength. The empathy, in a sense of they'll be with you for a shoulder to cry on. But finally, at the end of the day, when you get up and walk, it's only going to be your 2 feet.
Makes sense.
Makes sense?
Yes. Thank you.
This side, go ahead.
Hello sir, my name is Chetan. I come from Bangalore, and I am from education sector as well. So I wanted to ask you, the sector can get quite brutal sometimes. The highs are really high, but the lows are really very low, almost rock bottom. So I wanted to ask you, were there any conscious efforts that were put from the C-suite at UpGrad to ensure that the morale of employees stay afloat during the rough times to ensure that the company culture doesn't get toxic. Because we all know, there were quite a lot of examples where things went very rough for a few companies. And how did the management at UpGrad ensure that that didn't happen to the employees? And also from the student perspective, from the consumer perspective, were there any efforts to enhance the experience so that the UpGrad brand remains intact or maybe gets better?
Yeah. It's a very, very pertinent question, very relevant in many ways. Look, I will just tell you the example that I said when the first time I could meet payroll and there 40 people. The very fact that I leveled with them and told them all the bad news, and I said, I'll tell you everything. And I don't know how we're going to recover from that. So the only thing I can tell you is, if anyone can recover from it, I will. And you've got to place that confidence in me in that context. And there's no further bad news. Just make them feel, here's somebody that one can trust. And at the end of the day, they took me out for a drink that evening versus me taking them. Even though they knew I don't drink. So that is one element there. I think when COVID came in, was obviously a very cathartic moment for a lot of people. And I would say, just having webinars at that time, communicate with people is a very valuable currency. I think they underestimate that. Because over-communicate is not one person talking and one little speech and it's all put out there. Again, if you identify with the people on what you want to do, the problems, and try and solve for them, that would be the second part. I think from my perspective, I spend more time on exit interviews than interviews. Somebody was leaving us, or we had asked that person to leave actually. And that can be quite detrimental, like asking somebody to leave, then I'm pinging him saying, call me for 2 minutes, and he thinks, just fired me, now you want to speak to me in the context. And then I wanted to just tell him that it was a short-lived thing, and it's nothing to do with you, but I just want to tell you that even in that period you were there, you made a difference in that context. And I think if you can do those characteristics and spend that time, now he sent me a 2-page mail about feedback of what he thinks we should do differently, and I'll take 2 nuggets from them. But I've suddenly converted an antagonistic exit person into something very different. And that comes with just, again, that sense of being able to be extremely open. And I think that makes a big difference to form culture. When we do our workshop, when we did our last offsite of the company, there were 30 of us, and we were going to a place for a drive 2 hours away. And then 1 hour into the thing, I diverted all the cars that we were going in to our villages. And then we spent the whole morning in our villages. And I've got scholarship students, skilling students, farmers, everyone to talk to them. Because my whole theme for the next 1 day was how to build something frugally. And there was not a single argument against that, because they just listened to a whole morning of how people with nothing had actually done something. So who the hell am I to actually now say, I need a resource, or I need 5 people to solve a problem? And that whole axis of what you're thinking changes. So how you connect with people, how you communicate, what you do can actually change the narrative of what you think you want to do to what it needs to be. But that needs a little bit of just plain thinking, and it has to come naturally. It can't come from an HR department. Yeah? All right, let's go up top. Go ahead. Okay, I don't know.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Kushi. I just wanted to ask you, when do you typically check your inbox during the day?
What time do I check in my inbox? Quite intermittent.
Are your notifications on?
Yeah.
All of them?
Sorry, what?
Are your notifications on?
On mails, yes. WhatsApp, no. Is that it?
Alright, go ahead, please. Again, I like the enthusiasm. You have to be enthusiastic the way you ask.
Hi sir, my name is Isha. I'm from Calcutta, and it's a very light question. I just wanted to ask, we grew up watching your films. What did you grow up watching? Who was your inspiration? And I'm just shooting in the dark here. It was around 60s, 70s when you were growing up. So, did you have access to world cinema? Because you did say you're coming from a lower middle class background. So, how did it all begin for you? Who was it?
Yeah. I can't recollect movies being a big part of it. I have to say I wasn't a big fan of movies. So it's not like, that's why I said I've always been the outsider. For me it was, I was starting a media company, first B2B, then B2C, then broadcast, and then content, and then movies. So to me it was like an entrepreneur's journey, and then the creative element of what it went to. So I don't think that. But I think the question you ask is very important, that who are your different role models? And I think it's a challenge because for me, I think the role models have been in bite size. Like when I look at a book, when I read non-fiction, I prefer to read 1 or 2 chapters, not the whole book. So I think sometimes you look at the index and then you just look at the things that sort of inspire you. So I think today role models is a combination of different things you see in different people than anything else. And I would say that when I've gone into some of our villages here, and if I sit down and talk to some of our excellent student girls, and they've actually, it's a very tough one because nobody asks you what do you want to do when you grow up. Here we just take it for granted. That's the sense of entitlement. But there, their parents can't have that conversation because even if they ask them that question, they won't be able to do anything about it. Second, nobody asks them that. So they don't know what to say about that thought process. And yet now this girl wants to either become a doctor or nursing or wants to be an astrophysicist. But 90% of them, they want to come back to their geography and give back. A little bit like what you said about your patriotism and whatever else. So that sense, I see a lot of it across the board. When we skill, forget about we skill in UpGrad, but we skill about 20,000, 30,000 youth in rural India in our not-for-profit. 5 years back, they all wanted to be electricians, masonry, whatever else. Right now, 50% of them want to do hospitality. Why? Because ambitions and aspirations are rising in the country from that point. 5 years back, all of them said, if you skill me, I need a job. Like, I guess everyone here is looking at this place. Now, today, 50% of them say, don't worry about it, I'll get self-employed. So that's the changing environment there, and I think to me those are great role models. So you don't have to find role models by looking up. You can just make eye contact with them.
Hi sir, my name is Naharika. You've been talking about sense of entitlement for a long time now. And for someone who sometimes feels a lot entitled about something and have some expectations from something, and that obviously disappoints you. And how can you rip off that sense of entitlement when you're starting out? If you want to start something of your own, you have to rip that off because many people will not live up to your expectations. So how can that person rip that off?
But having strong expectations, having ambition, having goalposts is not being mixed up with the sense of entitlement. Right? Because sense of entitlement is what you think should come your way. You've got to walk the talk and do what you want to do. So go with whatever you want to do, but you've got to be able to walk the talk and get out and do it. The sense of entitlement makes you feel that it needs to come to me. And that I think is a long starter from that point of view, because that will lead to more disappointment. But when you walk the talk, you will have challenges that will come your way, but they won't be earth-shattering for you. Because your expectations won't be that high on yourself when you have that sense of that. Does that make sense?
We take 2 last questions and then I have one final question and we will wrap this up. We've already taken 30 minutes more, like it's 1:30. That's the time. It's 1:30. Okay. Alright, go ahead. Please go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi. My name is Deep. You take leadership of such large organizations, and you're constantly thinking about what next. What's the next vision? How do you mentally log off from work as well, right? Or how do you take that break? Because a lot of founders, or even a lot of working professionals, for us, it's very difficult to take that break. Even taking this leap that 1 year I'm not going to be working. How do you manage that, or what do you tell yourself? What keeps you going? And a second level question is, what do you do to take a break?
Yeah, no, I think that break is about being switched on and switched off, right? And I think just recharging and switching tracks
playing a game of squash in the middle of the afternoon is taking a break, right? Making a movie is also taking a break. Why? Not because it's entertainment, but because I'm doing something very different from what I'm doing here. That's a definition of taking a break. Taking a break is not going to Cayman Island. It's not about sitting a margarita on the beach at all. That's not necessarily taking a break. So I think reading a book, being curious, switching tracks. If one day I'm sitting here having this to me is break. Would you not consider I'm on a break at this point in time? I'm not working, I'm on a break. So this is a break point of view. If I go down and do something if we're in our villages for 2-3 days, it's hard work, it's very hard, it's very traumatic. Then we're sitting with people in the night reviewing where we need to go, where should the resources go. But it's a different charge. So I think the definition of break is also a switching off from something and switching on to something else. It could be a game of chess, it could be a swim, it could be making a movie, it could be doing whatever you want to do. I mean, last 3 days, I was out of the country in the UK. And for me, the taking a break was doing 6-7 hour walks. Like just walk and walk and walk and walk across. And you can go to a city, I think we all in India love it because we can't walk in our city. It's such a treat when you're traveling that you can walk. To me, it's a major recreation. Go ahead.
There's someone pointing at her.
Hello sir, I'm Sumedha Tripathi. Since you mentioned a couple of times that you don't believe in having a plan B, for a person who keeps 10 different plans when one plan doesn't work out, what is your pick-me-up? How do you pick yourself up? And the people who believe in your plan A, how do you motivate them that this plan is going to work no matter what?
Yeah, I don't think we need to keep it in a very straight jacket. I mean, this does not mean that one is not flexible. I think it's very important that the message should not be no plan A means inflexibility. Or, come what may, I'm going to hold on to this idea even after I've been told. So just to be clear, when you make a categorical statement, it should not be misunderstood that it is rigid, cast in stone, inflexible. Actually, none of those. It's just that when you're looking at something and you always feel, yeah, but if this doesn't happen, like I'm going to leave my job for 2 years and give myself a chance to become an entrepreneur. That to me is a recipe for failure because nothing's going to happen in 2 years. Or something may happen in 2 years, but then may get reversed. So if you start making deals with yourself in that context, so I just wanted to say that if you make a plan B that says, I can always go back to my job, and you'll never be an entrepreneur. Let's be very clear, because you always have that optionality. Like I think I didn't have that optionality. I didn't do my CA, I didn't do my MBA. I wasn't going to get into a thought process. And at that time, you were looked at as you couldn't get yourself a job, so you started to work for yourself. That was how entrepreneurship was looked at that time. So to me, that's the element of how that would go. Your question never was what? That how do I...
So how do you motivate people who are with you on your plan A when it doesn't work?
Self-conviction. It has to be with self-conviction. It has to be a situation that we will prevail and we will go into that thought process. I can't pay you your salary tomorrow, but I'll figure it out. That takes a little bit of tenacity. But I think it's also somehow the way you say it, then you've got to build a track record. And in the past, if I've done it twice and I paid the salary the third time around, people will believe you more. But you need to be honest about it. Because if you can't pay it, don't say, I can't pay it. Because if you can't pay it and call it a day, that's perfectly fine. Right? So you won't have a liquor baron sitting out and after 8 years saying, I apologize that I didn't pay salary to my airline staff people in that context. That's not contextually right.
So may I interject off topic and just ask one more question?
Yep.
So I believe Laksh is the best movie ever made. So and I do believe that it is the closest to what Armed Forces and MBA is, IMA is.
Yeah.
So how did you agree to the script? And obviously Farhan Akhtar is the director there, he obviously got after the script. But what was your belief?
Farhan was had a very clear vision on what it was. And when you read the story, it was a very... He had to go to the army to get clearance, because anything you do, by the way, whether it's a Sam Manik show or OE or whatever else, you need to go to the NSA, you need to go to UpGrad, you need to go to the army, you need to go to the armed forces. They need to see everything, whether it's been pictured in the right manner. And
they were flabbergasted. They said, yeah, can we celebrate this manner? So I think it is. For me, I've always think the soft power, as I said, we underestimate our ability to be able to influence and create role models. The role model in the first half, Hrithik was not the role model. But that's it. He was a complete role model because you first need to be a loser to be a winner. Because if you're a winner the first time around, chances are you're going to be a loser after that.
Thank you so much, sir.
Only one.
No, just please let me get some order in this. But we'll try to call him back. Don't worry.
Hello, sir. I'm Nikhil. I just have one quick question for you. For someone like me who has an idea or a plan for an education startup, what will be your golden advice to me when things get tough, and probably which I will remember at least for the next 10 years?
Firstly, it won't be golden. But you're saying, what's the advice I will give you that you will remember? No, I think you have to identify what problem is, why are you keen on doing it. So you have to go a little bit in this sector, which is impact. You need to be very clear what problem you're going to solve, at what level you want to solve it. Just be careful because we all get very excited of saying, I want to solve problems that scale. Not everyone can solve problems at scale, and not everything, and you set yourself up for so sometimes be very realistic what you want to do, for how many people you want to do it, where you want to create that impact. Because sometimes you feel, if I do it for 10, I can do it for millions. It doesn't work that way, and then you fail what you would otherwise have succeeded from going from 10 to 1,000. So I would say think about the scale element, think about really the problem you're planning to solve for people, and how relevant is that. But most of it, you have to be measured on impact and outcomes, not on your input. So start measuring yourself on your output, not on your input.
Last question, and then he was too enthusiastic.
Hello sir, I'm Nishal, I'm from Mumbai. So my question to you is, so when you started in the business world, it was all about cash flow generating businesses and more importance on generating cash in long-term businesses. But now as you see, it's all about funding, getting valuations, building a unicorn. So is it distracting us from building a long-term sustainable business? And us like 25-year-olds, 24-year-olds, what is the sustainable way to go ahead, like to build a valuation-based business or build a cash flow-based business? Because right now the only thing
I'll interrupt you right here, right now. First, please say, there is no such thing as building a valuation business. Because what does that actually mean, firstly? And you're seeing that. You're seeing new economy companies that have raised money at values where 2 investors or 4 investors and a founder got together and put a value. And now the listed entity in the public markets, which is really the benchmark, 60% of all new economy companies are below the IPO price in the last 2 years. Why? Because what you thought was your value for vanity point of view, now that 1 million people or 1 lakh people are investing in you, they have a very different objective. Second, there's never the concept of sort of either or, because you have to be able to build long-term businesses and not. I think we get obsessed with wealth creation before we can get to value creation. But first you need to create value, and the real value you're going to be able to create is long-term value. 2-3 investors coming in there and giving you a certain sense of value is not necessarily the best value. I'll give you an example, not to be cryptic, because look, every entrepreneur goes through that. The education sector today is suffering because it had excess capital. Okay? One company raised $5 billion. What the hell do you do with education? $5 billion. Nobody does that. It's like a test case of excess capital. Now, because of that, you sponsor the cricket team, you sponsor Federer, you sponsor every sports person in the sun, and you spend money on marketing because your imagination is not going to go that way. So I think there's no question about it. Just go out and build the business you want to build. Value will come. Value is not because 2 people on the way gave you a valuation. Because at some stage that's going to be tested in the real world. So VC capital is like doing your MBA. And the IPO part is when you go out and your MBA.
All right, Darling. Thank you so much. Largest problem statements that you're working on right now that potentially the students here can learn from?
Yeah, So I think aspiration levels in rural India is huge and it's growing. And I think that we are underestimating how we can be a Viksit Bharat, because it's not about being the third largest economy in the world. It's about most of our people. You can't be an advanced country because you are the largest economy, because now 1.4 billion into whatever per capita you get to that. So the big challenge today for all of us as to being a Viksit Bharat is how we're going to be an advanced country, which means how are 600 million people per capita going to go to a level where the base is above most other people, and in a place, so that's problem statement number one. I think the problem statement number two would be, we have again, and I'm obsessed with rural parts, so I will bring it down to that because those are challenging ideas. We're not going to be able to urbanize India to that level, which means that we'll have to find rural economies, whether it's agriculture school or animal husbandry school, or we're the biggest dairy exporter in the world because we get to whatever we want to do. So how, when we cannot urbanize our cities as we've all been seeing, and we're not being able to do that, do we get rural India to actually feel they're going to be part of being a Viksit Bharat in that context? Would be two problem statements.
Right.
But I do spend a lot of time on that.
No, absolutely, guys. My recommendation would be please work on this. Get in groups, right? Send it to me for feedback. I'll work with you and let's send him something.
Yeah, and I will reply to the mail on the same day.
Thanks everyone.
Okay, we're taking one group picture.
Everyone, please come in the center. कौन सी?